Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Rose Fryer, and today I'll present my project, The Influence of Personality and Gender on Emotional Reactivity in Sport, a psychophysiological study using GSR. My central question was, how do emotions shape performance? Using Galvanic skin response, I set out to uncover how personality and gender influence these physiological reactions, making the invisible emotional impact visible. I want to start with how I'm defining emotion in this research. I'm drawing on the work of Gross, who described emotion as a complex state involving subjective experience, physiological arousal, and behavioural expression. And that's why I found this quote from Jones so powerful. Emotions are not a side effect of sport, they are the terrain it is played on. It's not that we somehow manage to play despite emotion, it's that we play through it. Every moment is saturated in emotion. Understanding this emotional terrain, I believe, vital if we want to support athletes truly. In this study, emotional reactivity refers to the intensity and duration of emotional response, particularly physiological arousal. To understand my method, let's touch on neuroscience. Take an athlete with an ACL injury. It's not just physical, it's emotional trauma. Buchanan found that recalling the injury reactivates the brain as if it's happening again. The hippocampus and amygdala memory and emotion centres light up. This triggers a physiological reactivation loop, activating the autonomic nervous system. GSR captures this emotional fingerprint as it manifests physically. Just picture Chloe Kelly's winning goal in the 2022 Women's Euro final. Imagine being her, heart racing, hands sweating, that's emotional reactivity. I wanted to explore what makes us different from each other. That's where personality comes in. I focus on two traits from Costa and McRae's 5-factor model, neuroticism and extroversion. Neuroticism involves emotional instability. Those high in it often experience more intense stress reactions. While extroversion is marked by sociability and positivity, extroverts tend to bounce back faster from negative emotion. These traits are biologically rooted and predictive. Canley showed that neuroticism is linked to a stronger amygdala activation in response to negative stimuli. Gender matters in emotional studies. Research shows women may be more physiologically reactive, possibly due to hormones or socialization. In sport, these differences might affect how athletes process and cope with emotional events. This isn't about stereotypes, it's about tailoring support to real differences. As Critchley notes, GSR offers real-time, objective insight into emotional arousal. No verbal explanation required. In sport, where feelings can be intense and hard to articulate, this is invaluable. Very few studies have explored how personality and gender interact to shape physiological responses during relived emotional sport memories, especially using GSR. My study sits at the intersection of personality, gender, physiology, and emotion. Most sport psychology relies on self-report. GSR allows us to see emotional impact more objectively. So, with that in mind, my study set out to answer 3 key research questions. Does GSR differ between positive and negative memories? Do traits like neuroticism or extroversion predict emotional reactivity? Does gender influence physiological and emotional response? Which led me to hypothesize GSR would be higher during negative memory recall. Neuroticism would predict higher GSR, extroversion lower GSR. And also females would show higher GSR levels than males. Our sample comprised of 19 university students aged 21 to 42 years from a psychology lab class. The gender breakdown is shown in this pie chart. All participants had prior sporting experience. We obtained informed consent and ethical approval. Anonymity and withdrawal rights were ensured. So let's look at the design of the study. It was structured with these elements. Within subjects, all participants completed both conditions, counterbalancing to minimise order effects, correlational elements, personality and gender with GSR, dependent variable, GSR, independent variables, emotion, personality and gender. For this study, we used several pieces of equipment. These included electrodes to measure skin conductance, an amplifier to strengthen the signals, and a computer to record the data. We took measurements in 3 key areas. First, we measured skin conductance to assess emotional arousal. Second, we assessed personality traits using the Big 5 inventory. And finally, we recorded basic demographic information from each participant. Participants then followed 5 steps. Electrodes were applied and they were seated comfortably. Baseline GSR was recorded for 1 minute. 30-second recall of a positive sporting memory. Completion of personality and demographic questionnaires. And finally, a 30-second recall of a negative sporting memory. To give you a clearer sense of the kind of memories we asked participants to recall, here are some examples of the questions we use. You'll notice that they're designed to elicit specific emotional responses. Let's start with the differences in GSR between positive and negative memory recall. GSR was higher during negative memory recall. However, it wasn't statistically significant. This means the difference might be due to chance. Effect size was small to medium, indicating a potential real-world difference that a larger sample might confirm. A bar chart was used to illustrate these trends. Next, let's look at the relationship between personality traits and GSR. Neuroticism showed a weak negative correlation with GSR and a negative recall, and extroversion showed a weak positive one with GSR and a positive recall. Neither was significant, possibly due to small sample size or emotion regulation. Pearson correlation was the chosen analysis, and scatter plots were used to show these relationships. Finally, let's turn to the question of gender differences. And here, perhaps surprisingly, I found no significant difference in GSR levels between male and female participants. The p-value was very high. In fact, contrary to my initial hypothesis, males on average showed slightly higher overall GSR levels than females. This challenges the prior research mentioned before, suggesting greater female reactivity. I used a mixing over here. It was appropriate for examining the effects of both between subjects and within subject factors and their interaction on the dependent variable. So let's take a moment to step back and interpret these findings. So negative recall triggered higher GCSR, supporting the negativity bias. Personality didn't predict GCSR significantly, again, possibly due to small sample or context. And to summarise, emotional reactivity is complex, shaped by memory type, contents and regulation. Let's now return to the findings on gender differences and their implications for sport. So as mentioned before, no gender difference in GSR was found. This suggests that the gender-emotion link in sports is complex. Socialisation and coping may influence how athletes of different genders respond. This reinforces that support strategies should be personalised, not based on assumptions. It is important now to acknowledge the limitations of my research, a crucial one being my small sample size. Another limitation is the reliance on emotional recall, as memories are subjective and can be distorted by a variety of cognitive biases. GSR doesn't exactly tell us whether an emotion is positive or negative either. Future work should use larger, more diverse samples, additional measures like heart rate variability, and examine how emotional regulation mediates physiological responses over a period of time. So, to bring it all together, this study sheds light on how personality and gender shape emotional reactivity in sport, both psychologically and physiologically. It shows the potential of tools like GSR to reveal what lies beneath performance. Emotion isn't just present in sport, it's fundamental to it. Understanding it helps us support athletes not just perform, but to thrive. Thank you so much for your time and attention today.